So how important was Alistair Darling to the independence campaign and the result?
Critical. I think on one level, Alistair was the only one who could have brought together all the different parties and different interests because he was respected and trusted. But I think on a more fundamental level, he was someone who represented our core message. We were spending our time saying to people this was a really serious and sober decision, and he and his personality and his whole approach to public life had always represented that. So he was absolutely essential. We wouldn't have done it without him.
Looking at the campaign as a whole, it's easy to argue that Better Together actually lost the campaign, given the yes vote share rose from around 30 to 45%.
Mm-hmm. Well, it depends how you judge winning and losing. I would say that's when the votes are counted. I think for us, when you look back over the last 10 years since the referendum, countries all over the world have been offered populist and nationalist propositions since then. And Scotland is the only country in the world that in that period said no thanks. So I think our win looks better as time has gone on.
Everyone will remember Project Fear, the nickname for the Better Together campaign.
Yeah.
Who gave that nickname to the campaign? Was it you?
So it came from a cybernet. So it was something that had been thrown at us on social media, and I think had been adopted as a sort of dark joke within the office.
It was bandied about in the office quite a lot, was it?
As a joke, I think, yeah, but never as a serious name
or a campaign strategy.
No, certainly not.
What was the most influential factor in the no win?
Funnily enough, I think it's actually that the SNP themselves lacked a confidence in their own argument. They spent their whole campaign saying to people that everything would change and nothing would change. And I think people could smell something wrong with that. They didn't quite believe that they were being told the truth by the other side. And I think that's what we were able to exploit on issues like currency, because people thought, well, if they're not willing to make the argument in a full-throated way for leaving the United Kingdom, why should we follow them?
Okay, Gordon Brown helped orchestrate the pledge for more powers after the referendum. And he also said in the weeks before the referendum that Scotland would be moving quite close to something near federalism. So are we near to federalism now? Absolutely.
If you compare the powers, the financial powers, the legislative powers that the Scottish Parliament has to assemblies in federal systems, it's, we compare very, very favourably to that. I think the real argument that people who criticise us on the powers of the Scottish Parliament are making is they say, well, you promised us fiscal autonomy, that we would keep all of our own money and spend all of our own money. But actually the pledge that was made at the time explicitly said that we were going to keep our share of UK funds, that we were going to continue to be part of that system. So I think we've absolutely got what was promised.
The past decade has seen huge upheaval, Brexit in particular. Brexit, now that's a strong argument for independence, isn't it?
Well, I think, funnily enough, it's become a cautionary tale for a lot of voters. A lot of voters look at Brexit and think actually breaking apart a union, a trading union with your most important neighbours is a lot more complicated than people think. I think the other thing that's happened is whether it's Brexit or Ukraine or COVID or all these crises we've had over the last decade, people are yearning for a quiet life. They want a period of stability. They want government to get on with things rather than picking fights with each other. And in that sense, actually, I think Brexit, perhaps counterintuitively, has worked against the nationalist campaign in Scotland.
In the 10 years since the independence referendum, independence support has remained high. It's remained at 45% roughly, or indeed above. A lot of that time, Nicola Sturgeon was in power. How closely do you think independence support is linked or was linked to Nicola Sturgeon?
So I think what Nicola did was remove some of the negatives of Alex Salmond's leadership. So most of those undecided voters who ended up breaking for no in the end, they didn't really like Alex Salmond. They didn't quite know why, but they just knew they didn't like the cut of his jib. And so I think Nicola Sturgeon, certainly initially, was able to remove some of those negatives from them. Of course, whether her political brand has survived in the long run is another matter.
That silent majority we heard so much about that we saw in 2014, is that still there?
Well, interestingly, a lot of them have died. So more than 500,000 of those no voters, particularly older no voters, have passed away in the decade since the referendum. And the interesting thing is, as you say, the polls haven't actually moved that much since 2014. So despite all the advantages that the SNP had, all those crises that were going on in British politics and the British economy, things have actually moved in the direction of the no side in that time. People are aging into being more sceptical voters.
You mentioned that because the theory put forward by Alex Salmon and others was that as a new generation of voters came through and older voters died, then there would be consistent majority support for independence. But you don't see that any evidence of that at all?
You don't see that coming because, and I say this as someone who until recently worked as a strategist, strategy is not the same as time. You can't just wait, you can't just stay where you are and hope that the world changes around you. You've got to do something to make the world change. And in the last 10 years, the SNP have camped where they were on all the issues that lost them the referendum 10 years ago and haven't moved their case forward. And as a result, the electorate haven't moved with them. So waiting is not a strategy.
Do you think another referendum will happen in your lifetime?
I think it'll depend on the Scottish people. I think if the Scottish people are desperate to see the question reopened, it'll be reopened. I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest that it is actually moving the other way, not just in terms of voters becoming more sceptical as time goes on, but also when you look at opinion polls and you ask people what the most important issues for them are, independence is falling down that ranking. And there's a feeling that it's moved from being an issue which was at the front of people's minds to being something that's in the background of the political debate instead.
So is independence dead or at least dormant?
It's sleeping. Whether it wakes up or not will be a matter for Scottish people, and also whether the SNP ever can recapture the confidence of arguing in an honest way for what leaving the UK entails.
Blair McDougall, thanks very much.
Thank you.